Hi, my name's Phill Webster. I'm an author of 2 books, Letting Glow and Glowing Deeper, and they are based around spirituality, mostly around life after death experiences and mediumship. So I'd always kind of had an eye on the esoteric, but I was kind of on the fence with it growing up. It interests me at a young age, as I think it does a lot of kids. But then as I got older, I got a little bit more cynical and kind of got involved in practical pursuits, and work and things like that. But then there was a catalyst that really sent me down this rabbit hole, and that happened in 2021, at the start of 2021. So we'd all been through COVID in 2020, and my mum lived on a place called the Isle of Wight, which is about 3 hours away from where I am in London. And I was trying to do the right thing and keeping away from her in lockdowns and all this and that. And we'd just gone through Christmas, and I hadn't seen her for a few months because I thought I was doing the right thing by keeping away. Anyway, she lived alone. She'd lived on this island alone for like the past 20 years or something like that. And she had various age-related health problems. She was 76 years old. She had heart issues, high blood pressure. But for all intents and purposes, I thought she was in reasonably good shape for her age. And I thought she'd be around for a while. So she'd grown increasingly lonely through COVID, as a lot of people do, particularly elder people that were isolating. But we would FaceTime every day. And on this particular day, around mid-January, I called her, and it was probably the 3rd call that day or something. And just to put a bit of backstory in it, so she lived in a very rural place. It's lots of countryside, beaches, things like that. And we hadn't got any family nearby, and I kind of knew her day-to-day routines. And just to reiterate, we were in another lockdown, so there shouldn't have been anyone with her. So this was around 10 o'clock at night, and when I called her, when I called, she picked up the phone, and as she kind of leant in, there was a man leaning in from the other side of the screen. And I saw him long enough that I could describe him. He had thinning grey hair, glasses, looked like he was maybe in his 60s, kind of a gaunt face. But he was there, and I saw him plain as day. And as she kind of pulled the phone up, he went out of shot. And I was shocked because, again, we were in a lockdown. There shouldn't have been anyone there. I didn't recognize the guy. And I said to my mum, I said, well, who's that? And she replied, who's what? And I said, okay, well, the guy, I just saw someone. And she just kind of dismissed it. And I said, and she started talking about her day. And I said, sorry, Mum, I said, I don't mean to interrupt, but are you telling me that there's no one there right now? And she said, no, there's not been anyone here all day, and just kind of dismissed it. And I think I interrupted her maybe 2 or 3 times and said, okay, look, so there's no one in the house. And she was like, no, And I could always tell when there was someone with her, because she would put on a lot of airs and graces, and she would speak a lot posher, and it was hard to get a straight conversation out of her. And she wasn't doing any of that. She wasn't acknowledging anyone. And I just kind of dismissed it, and I thought, well, I guess I must have been mistaken, although I'd definitely seen someone. He wasn't like an apparition or anything like that, and he didn't look like anyone I knew. And we spoke for like another 45 minutes, and she didn't acknowledge anyone or anything. No one said goodbye to her. Anyway, I went to bed that night. The next morning I woke up to a phone call from a neighbor. They couldn't get in the house because my mum had had a heart attack, and she passed away that morning. So my mind kind of immediately went back to this guy. So I was thinking, okay, so what are we talking here? I don't believe that there was anyone physically there, but I did go to the supernatural, and I thought, well, what are we talking? Angels, spirit guides, a family member that I didn't know, or something like that. And it kind of played on my mind for maybe the next couple of months. Yeah. So after this, I spoke to a bunch of people. I would talk to friends, and then depending on which side of the fence they sort of sat on sort of, spiritual matters, some people were saying, well, obviously that was some sort of sign that your mum was about to pass, which rang true with me. And then of course other people were saying, well, who knows, you weren't there, and I wasn't there. So I mean, I can't absolutely say 100% that there was definitely no one in the house with her. But knowing her routine and what was going on at the time and everything else, I truly believe that there's no one was physically in the house with her. And the logical explanation seemed to me to be some sort of spirit guide, which I didn't know anything about. So I was working on a movie at the time. I was working on one of these big Marvel movies, and it was a good stretch of work. And that was somehow also why I hadn't seen her for a while, because there were a lot of regulations around COVID and film sets and all the rest of it, and I didn't want to lose this job. So that was partly responsible for why I hadn't seen her for a couple of months. But anyway, I had a lot of time on this job to just kind of isolate, because we were literally isolated from each other. And I sort of went back to literature that I'd read in the past, and sort of not groundbreaking stuff, but things like Neil Donald Walsh, and I started reading about mediumship. And I just kind of, I really wanted to explore all areas, because this thing kept playing on my mind. I was thinking, well, what was that then? You know, what is a spirit guide? And sort of went back to the roots of where I started years before, when I was interested in these things, which led me to finding out about spiritualist churches. So I didn't know what a spiritualist church was, and in London, and they're kind of 10 a penny. Each little town in London pretty much has one. And I walked past one day that I'd probably walked past 20 times before, and I'd never taken any notice of it. And I noticed outside they had a board, and it said that they were having a demonstration of mediumship that weekend. So I thought, all right, I'll go and check this out. And I went in there very skeptical. I don't know why. I mean, I went in there hoping that I was going to get some sort of message from my mum, but I couldn't help but think that there was a possible scam element to it. I really didn't know. I hadn't experienced anything like this before. And there was a lady there, and she was giving a demonstration, and there were perhaps 20 people in the audience, something like that, or the congregation. And very slowly she started going around the room and giving confirmations to people about family members that had passed over and friends. And it seemed that she had like a 90% success rate. Everyone was agreeing, like, yeah, okay, that was my dad, or that was my uncle and my grandma. And I was thinking, well, this seems legit, right? And she sort of went around the room, and eventually when she got to me, she started talking about a young man, and I was thinking, well, okay, I don't know who this person is that she's talking about. And she kept insisting that I knew who he was, and I was disappointed that my mum wasn't coming through. And this is probably about 2 months after my mum had passed. And she kept talking about this guy, and talking about how we went to college together and things like this, and all of a sudden the penny dropped, and I was like, oh, okay, she's talking about my friend that passed away when we were around 20 years old. And everything she said fell into place. And at the end of this, just before she finished, she said, I've got a lady with me also. And one important factor is that her accent changed. So this medium had a very strong Cockney London accent, and all of a sudden it changed to a Northern English accent, which is like, or rather a Midlands accent, which is what my mum had. And just everything she said that came out of her mouth, it was literally like my mum speaking. And, you know, I just kind of lump in my throat, and I have to say it was very brief. It just briefly described her passing and what happened afterwards, and that she was surrounded by love and angels, forgive me, and all the things that people talk about, and just for me that was just life-changing, essentially. Again, the game changer is that it was my mum's voice that came out of this woman's mouth. So so this whole experience really made me reevaluate a lot of other things that had happened to me over the years. And it would seem that every few years there would be some sort of odd experience that I would dismiss, or some more profound than others. But it would seem that something had been tapping me on the shoulder for a long time. And because of where I was in my headspace at the time, through the years, I would either dismiss it or just deal with it and then move on and not think twice about it. So it really opened the door to make me reframe a lot of things that had happened in my past, and look at them through this new lens, and all of a sudden things started making sense. It was like, oh, okay, maybe this has been it all along. And then my mum passing was really the catalyst to send me down this path. And since then, my life's gone in a completely different direction to what I thought I was doing. I was working on movies and tentatively calling myself an actor. I started writing down my experiences as I dove into learning about mediumship, and that turned into my first book, Letting Glow, which has just sent me on a completely different path. So yeah, really my next steps was I read a book by a medium called Claire Broad. And one interesting thing I found about this book was that she could have been from anywhere in the world. She could have been American, she could have been Australian, or it turns out she was English. So when I opened up this book, the first story took place across the street from where I was living, which I just found coincidental at the time. There seems to be a lot of those since going down this route. So her first story took place in a cemetery across the road from where I lived, and I could literally look out the window and see this cemetery about this story, which was her first experience of mediumship. And pretty soon after that, I saw that Claire was giving a day course at a place called the College of Psychic Studies in London, which sounded nuts to me. I was kind of like, the College of what? Like, it sounded like, you know, the X-Men school or something. Anyway, I went along to this place and took part in Claire's workshop about mediumship, and we kind of hit it off really well. And we've been in touch since, and she's since become my teacher and a friend and all sorts. And I sit in a circle with her, and I've been developing it as a medium over the last few years since my mum passed. I wouldn't call myself a medium. My work has sort of taken me down this route. I work as, I suppose, for want of a better expression, I work as a spiritual life coach now. Elements of mediumship comes into it, but I'm still very respectful of the term, because obviously we're dealing with grief and it doesn't always work. And I'm very much, I feel, at the start of my path regarding mediumship. So my first book, Letting Glow, I've essentially, I call it Demystifying the Mystical. I feel that we all have mystical experiences, like every day, all the time. When you start peeling away the layers of just reality, this whole thing is nuts, right? It's a whole thing, but we've got used to it, and we sort of take it for granted. I think that we all have moments of intuition. You can walk into the room and say that you can cut the air with a knife, or, you know, you have a gut feeling, or we say that we can't quite put our finger on something. But if you suddenly started using words like clairvoyance or clairaudience, then people typically look at you like you're nuts, right? But I think that we're talking about the same thing, that it's just a question of semantics, and that we all have these moments, and it's around us all the time. So yeah, essentially the books are about demystifying the mystical and just kind of pointing out that these things happen around us all day, every day. There are a lot of meditations in the books. So the first book was really about my journey and the story that I just told you, and then things that had happened previously to me that turned out to be quite... I probably had a couple of spiritual awakenings that I didn't recognize as spiritual awakenings. And sort of my own experience. The second book goes more into wider spiritual practices. I talk about indigenous shamans and witchcraft and sort of just all these things that I found fascinating as I went into this arena. I just kind of documented my journey as I learned about it. Yeah. So I was thinking of these books as a trilogy. So I've got two down, and the third one hasn't come through as quickly as the first two did. I am writing a third book, but I don't think that it's part of that trilogy, much to probably the annoyance of my publishers. But yeah, the third book seems bigger. I'm definitely not the first person to have claimed to channel a book, but this book that I'm writing now, it is essentially a conversation, and I find it really fascinating. I'm either going nuts or I'm in conversation with what I believe is a guide. The things that come through, they're smarter than me. Where I've had to go back and just research some of it and say, okay, I just wrote this, and then I have no idea what I wrote, but I'll look it up and it's there. So it's interesting. It's a thing. I'm really looking forward to it come out, but it seems to be bigger than my story. It touches on life after death, consciousness and time, which is I always find like a fascinating subject, and sort of alternate timelines and all sorts of fun stuff like that. It definitely does. I feel that when we're faced with, I'm no expert. I mean who is, but I feel that we unfortunately brush death aside. We have this notion, and I wonder if this notion comes from having this eternal consciousness that I believe that we do go on, and at some core level that we know that, and that's why we kind of just assume that we'll keep going forever. Even when we get into our later years, it doesn't feel like, although you can decline in health and recognize that, it still feels like you're going on, right? I mean, I'm nearly 50 now, and I still, like as a lot of people say, I still feel 24 or something. So I find it quite fascinating and sad that we don't really deal with it, but there might be something behind that. But yeah, it's definitely changed my perception. I think as soon as we're faced with death, whether it's someone close to us or our own mortality, then obviously these questions come up. And I'm forever the eternal skeptic, even though I've experienced some amazing things, and especially through mediumship and given people evidence that I know that I don't know about their loved ones that have passed over. I still can't help but be skeptical. So I'm just constantly questioning everything. And sometimes when I watch myself talk, and I've given workshops and things like that, the me from 5 or 6 years ago would have just instantly dismissed any of this, I'd have been curious, but I would have had a healthy dose of skepticism. And I still do. I don't buy into every single thing just because it's woo-woo or this or that, you know. I still kind of look at it from a skeptical angle. But yeah, for the most part, I would say that my life has definitely changed. And again, I think one of the things that I've really recognized is looking at these experiences that I had before that I just dismissed. I feel that if anybody does go through an awakening or something like that, and not to dismiss mental illness or again, I'm not a doctor, but I feel that a lot of things might be misunderstood when people go through something as a spiritual awakening, which is a bit of a broad term. And again, I'm not dismissing mental illness, but I think that there's a lot to investigate from all angles, rather than just, you know, giving someone pills and saying, okay, well, this will fix you, because I had an experience myself like that. Yeah, I think that just meditation, and I try to practice meditating every day. I don't sit there for hours or anything like that, but it's really been a game changer for me, and I feel that it's really opened the door to improve my mediumship and all aspects of life, really. I think just taking that space to sit with yourself. And as soon as I hear meditation, even me now as well, after years of doing it, I still kind of shy away from it. It's like, you know, we have stuff to do, we've got to get on with our day, and to just find that time to spend even 10 minutes with yourself can be uncomfortable for all sorts of reasons. But I feel that when we start recognizing that we're not our thoughts, and I'm definitely not the first person to talk about this, but when you can create that space and recognize that you're not your thoughts, then I believe that opens up that space to sort of recognize yourself as, or recognize your intuition, or create that open space for something else to come in, which is how I feel mediumship works. When I recognize that I'm, whatever this thing is, it's just going on non-stop 24/7. When I can sort of detach from that and recognize myself as observing that, then again, that sort of creates a space to sort of take notice of any intuitive hits that come through, or, you know, dare I say, spirit guides or something. So frustratingly, I don't know who the guy was. He was definitely there. He didn't look like an uncle or you know, presumably my dad. I haven't seen him since I was 18, and I would imagine that he's not around anymore. But I didn't recognize him, frustratingly. So one thing that it did make me think about was that, you know, my mum's life was bigger than me, right? She'd had a good 30 years or so before I came along. Although I just kind of, you know, we recognize our parents as our involvement in their lives. So maybe it was someone that I didn't know about. Maybe it was an old boyfriend, or it could have been anyone. So I've kind of made peace with it. But yeah, I don't know who he was. I don't. Frustratingly, I don't. So when I first started learning about mediumship, I was kind of obsessed with, okay, well, you know, everyone's got a spirit guide or multiple guides. And then it's kind of divisive. People have different opinions on it. Some mediums that have been working for 40 years like disagree with the way that I look at it. So I suppose with any of these things, it's quite subjective. Like all of these experiences, all of these sort of spiritual experiences, they're usually very personal, and what works for you might be completely different for someone else. So in terms of guides, there's definitely one around that I'm getting, for want of a better expression, downloads from. I mean, everyone's using that in this arena. I haven't gotten any names. I just know that it's whatever it is, it's way smarter than me, and I feel that, you know, names probably aren't important. That just kind of helps us conceptualize it some more. I found when I first got into mediumship, and I was really missing my mum, and I remember one day going to her house on the Isle of Wight, and I was having a hard time with it, and I went to the beach, which was nearby, and I was doing all of these things that I felt I should do. I was meditating every day. I was learning all I could about mediumship, and this was really coming from a place of just really missing my mum at the end of the day, and just wanting to get something from her, you know, more than what the medium had told me. And I remember one night, I'd probably had a couple of glasses of wine. I was sitting on the beach, and I was just kind of saying, okay, either I'm nuts or what is this? Like, I'm doing everything right. I'm learning about spirit guides. I'm meditating. I'm working with some of the best mediums in the world. Like, just give me something, you know. I just needed something to just show me that I was on the right path. And I was getting quite upset. And I remember it was like mid-October, something like that. And there was a cafe next to me, which was just like a summer cafe, and it had a board outside of it, like a chalkboard, where they would normally have, you know, the day specials, things like that. And I just, as I was sitting there just asking for this sign and just feeling very frustrated that I wasn't progressing, that I'd hit a plateau with my spiritual development, I turned to look at this cafe, and my name was wrote on it, and it said hi, as in H-I, and then it just said Phill multiple times, like over and over again. I was just astounded, right? And I took a photo of it because I was like, okay, well, no one's going to believe this. But I took that as a as a massive sign. Now, I'm not saying that I believe that a piece of chalk appeared and my name was magically wrote there. Maybe kids have been playing there or something like that, and someone happened to have the same name as me. But there was so many of these synchronicities, and that was a particularly big one that came at just the right time. So yeah, it's been, again, I would have been the first person to dismiss this a few years ago, but now I'm just like, all right, I'll take it. You know, I don't believe that every single white feather that drops by me is my mum giving me a sign. You know, I don't, you know, but if that works for you, then why not? Yeah, sure. So there's one thing that I keep mentioning. I don't know how to weave this in, but like I was talking about making me look at other stuff. I had quite a profound experience in my mid-30s, which was, I didn't recognize it as anything to do with spiritual. Anyway, I'll start again just to give a bit of backstory on that. So yeah, so one of the first things that my mind went back to when I kind of took this route was something that happened in my mid-30s. And like I said, I'm nearly 50 now, so this was a while back. I was living in Helsinki in Finland, and I was living a pretty hedonistic lifestyle. I was running bars and clubs. I was like a nightclub manager. And that brought with it all sorts of unhealthy trappings. I was working all night and until 5 in the morning each day and sort of sleeping all day. Obviously being surrounded by alcohol and people just partying all the time, you kind of fall into that. And I wasn't living a horrific lifestyle, but I wasn't. I think that kind of lifestyle creeps up on you, and you have to sort of keep an eye on it if you ever find yourself in those circles, because you start normalizing it and you start thinking that, well, people just drink every night and that's fine, and there's after parties constantly. And I was kind of living this kind of, like I say, a hedonistic lifestyle. So I wasn't, my best self, that's for sure. Anyway, so during this period, I woke up one morning. I wasn't hungover or anything like that, which was often the case in those days. And I was just kind of mulling over the concept of time, right? And I was thinking about how we only truly have this moment of now. And I was just kind of wondering about that and thinking about, how we've got a timeline and, things get, we go from A to B and stuff like that, but we can only really experience this moment of now. And again, I'm not the first person to talk about it, like way smarter people than me have described this way better, but something shifted in that moment, and I can't really put it into words, but all of a sudden linear time just kind of fell away in this moment, and all of a sudden it was kind of like just now, and all of us, it was terrifying, and people talk about connecting with the moment of now and living in the now and all that. It was like that times 1,000. It was all of a sudden like my concept of linear time just fell away, and it was just suddenly like now, all the time. It was like a spotlight were being shone on me or something, and I as though I'd stepped through a door, and everything was just different. It was like I was suddenly moving along to this like ultra high frequency, and it freaked the hell out of me. And I was like, okay, I just panicked. And it just didn't let up, and I thought, okay, well, maybe this will just sort of wear off, and I thought, well, I'll go out for a walk. And I remember putting my headphones in and walking down the road and looking down at the people further down the road from me, and this doesn't sound that smart, but I remember looking at them thinking, okay, well, they're over there and I'm here, but in a moment I'm there, right? And a few moments ago I was in my apartment, but where's that moment gone? Like, it was just here, right? But where is it, right? I know that I experienced it, and I know that I can sort of put it behind me. And again, we have this sort of perceived timeline of events behind us. But where is it physically, right? And this suddenly seemed absurd to me. And again, I was thinking, I know that in 10 minutes I'm going to be down the street over there, but where is that moment already, right? It's like we've literally just got now all the time. And it kind of just sent me into a complete spin, and kind of freaked the hell out of me. And I went to work that night, and this thing just didn't let up. It was almost like, it was just, I couldn't sort of just drift off and think, well, what am I going to eat for dinner later? Or what did I do yesterday? It was just suddenly like now. And it was relentless. I just couldn't sort of drift off into my thoughts. And I remember trying to explain it to friends at work, and they were just like, okay, with this sort of look of pity on their face. And I knew that nobody understood what I was talking about. I went to a doctor and tried to explain what was going on, and they said, well, this sounds like psychosis. which terrified me because I didn't see that as ever being, something that would be coming into my life. And the doctor gave me like a bunch of sleeping pills, some anti-anxiety meds. She did say it was mild psychosis, since I was still going to work and getting on with life through whatever was going on with me. But it really felt like I was kind of like, the best way to describe it was like hanging onto a bar, like that was greased up, and I was just there with my fingertips. That felt like reality to me, and this thing just didn't let up. It went on for days, and then when this turned into a couple of weeks, the anti-anxiety meds that didn't touch it, the sleeping pills would knock me out, but I would wake up the next day and this whole thing would start up over again. It was just now. And it was terrifying. I was just in a constant state of mild panic. Went to another doctor, he said the same thing. Yeah, it's probably psychosis. And I wasn't getting anywhere, and I tried to drink it away. That just made things 1,000 times worse. I did, I would try to I was also working for myself as a personal trainer at the time, so I just kind of went to exercise and just try to concentrate on physical things and just keep up with the practical. And this thing just didn't let up, and I was literally at the end of my rope. I thought, well, if this is the way that my brain's working now, I'm out of here, right? This just doesn't work for me. I felt completely detached from, everyone. It was really isolating, and I didn't know what it was that I was going through. I just really thought that I was losing my mind. I eventually found a therapist, who I also found out was a hypnotist. So I went to this guy and I was kind of like, look, just hypnotize this away, just like zap this away. I just want to get back to whatever's going on out there. And he was the first person that listened to me and didn't sort of dismiss it. And he was like, oh yeah, he said, no. And I was scared that I was developing schizophrenia or something like that. And he just calmly said, this isn't, he said, you're not going mad. He said, this is an awakening. And I was like, well, I don't care, man. Just make it go away. And he sort of explained that hypnosis didn't work like that, but that he would give me some steps to get through this. And he also used an odd word, and at the time, like I said, this wasn't my arena, but he said, I think that you're a mystic, was his word. And I was like, okay, again, cool, but just make this stop. I remember feeling kind of embarrassed that he'd used that word, because I just didn't really know what he meant. Anyway, he gave me a very basic grounding meditation, which, since I've learned about meditation in recent years, was pretty standard, just to sort of visualize and sort of keep yourself grounded. And I came back from whatever this thing was that had been going on for months, and it was like the first relief that I'd had in a long time, and the whole thing started up again soon afterwards. But I just kept practicing this meditation on a daily basis, and slowly I would have like one good day, and then that turned into 2 good days, and over the course of a year, I kind of came back online or offline, depending how you look at something like that. So it was a terrifying experience, and as soon as I was done with it, I very quickly put it behind me. I did change quite profoundly. It kind of made me reevaluate the way I was living my life, and hopefully I got to be a bit of a better person because of it. But I was just thankful to sort of have my mental health back on track, and I just put it behind me. So I didn't attribute that to anything spiritual, despite what this therapist had said and all the rest of it. But as I've gone through this now, I feel that was possibly a very profound and one of the first steps that have put me on this path where I am now. Because I'm talking about this stuff all day long with people now, and since writing about that in my first book, I was amazed at how many people got in touch and also claimed to have a very similar experience to that, who did recognize it as a spiritual awakening and dealt with it and what have you. But I found it interesting. Again, not dismissing mental illness by any means, but I wonder how often this happens and somebody might get misdiagnosed when they can sort of bring themselves back with meditation. I mean, it's a bit controversial, so yeah. But yeah, that was that experience. So yeah, I mean, when he called me a mystic, this guy, I was in Finland and I just put it down to maybe the language barrier, that he'd used an odd word, and some call me a mystic. I mean, it didn't really impact me at all. I just wanted this thing to stop. At the end of the day, I suppose a mystic is, if I've done a lot of research, I've studied female spirituality in the Middle Ages and kind of looked into a lot of shamanic traditions and practices, and I suppose a mystic is somebody that back in the day that people would go to for spiritual advice at the end of the day, whether that's through spirit guides or visions or, I don't know, medicinal plants. But yeah, at the end of the day, it seems to be that that's essentially where I've ended up. I'm consulting with people daily about their spiritual path, and yeah, it's kind of odd. I hate these labels. I hate using words like psychic. I hate medium. I don't know what this whole thing is, but there does seem to be something to it, and yeah, it's interesting. I don't know. I think there's probably maybe it's just the natural skeptic in me, or yeah, I just I don't know. I just can't help but have this, I suppose, the stigma around them. And I'm very much involved in it, involved in this world now, and shouldn't really shy away from it. But it does get frustrating, because I feel that oftentimes when we talk about, again, what I think are very subjective experiences, when you have these experiences, they'll typically come in as a feeling or a sense of knowing. And when you have those moments, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I know this is the truth, right? But try to explain it to anyone else, and it's almost impossible, right? So yeah, I feel that there aren't words to describe a lot of these experiences, and I kind of hate going back to using words like downloads or spirit guides even. I mean, I think that's just the way that we can conceptualize them, and I suppose psychic, medium, psychic in particular, I don't know, it just conjures up this stereotype image that I get of that kind of thing. But yeah, I guess at the end of the day, that's what I'm doing. Yeah. Yeah, I feel that. So I really struggled with grief. Again, I'm not an expert on grief, but I didn't expect it to hit me as hard as it did. We all, and especially parents, and of course people have different relationships with their parents, so I'm not saying this is across the board, but I really miss my mum. And that first year in particular, I was just crying every day. Second year, every other day. And then I think by the third year mark, and definitely learning about spiritual practices and the path that I've taken now, I wouldn't, maybe fast track is a bit of an insensitive word, but I feel like it did speed up my grieving process somehow, and got me through it a lot quicker, because I kind of poured what I was experiencing into these books, and then all these amazing things were happening. I was learning from mediums, I was learning from shamans, and again started slowly giving evidence to other people about people that had passed on, and I'm like, well, I know that I don't know that. So again, yeah, there seems to be something to this, which really reassured me that my mum's all right at the end of the day. I mean, it didn't make me miss her any less, and I still do. Especially, with life events, or the first birthday, the first Christmas, the first anniversary of them passing. It's tough, and way tougher than I realized. But yeah, I think that there is a path through that, and these kind of things aren't for everyone. But for me, yeah, it's very much helped me heal in tapping into these, whatever these other things are that are out there or within us. Yeah, and again, to be a broken record, but meditation, I feel that meditation has really been a game changer for me. Yeah, and to connect with, I don't know if we're, I think you could change the word spirit guide for your higher self or consciousness or whatever, sounds easiest for you. Because again, I kind of hate these labels. But I think it's all the above is the same, So yeah, that's what's helped me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember getting really offended with people that after a few months said, well, it's probably time for you to move on now. And I'm like, what? Like 3 months in, and from people that have still got their parents. It's really had to bite my tongue a couple of times. But each to their own, I had a friend that also, I mean, a lot of us lost people and parents and grandparents through that whole period of time around 2020 and 2021. People deal with it differently. A very good friend of mine, he did take that approach. He did close it off after a month and put it behind him and move forward. And I just, personally, I couldn't do that. But, whatever works for you. Yeah.